During the Pariah Nexus conflict, ancient weapons from the dark age of technology, a subject you know I love doing, are unleashed by the Mechanicus and answered by weapons of mass destruction from the Necrons themselves. What exotic archaeotech is deployed and who stops them, and what does Vashdar corrupt on the Imperial side? Friends, let's find out, and welcome to another 40k video. Drawing on Crusade Pariah Nexus, Roboute sends Belisarius Cawl and his fleet into the conflict in the Pariah Nexus, as Roboute himself must deal with the Plague War. At this moment in the fight, the Imperium has been able to bring down one of the Blackstone pylons, a key part of the Necrons' infrastructure, and so this puts the eyes of the Silent King onto Imperial forces, and with this he announces that the Technomandrites fighting with Zarek cannot hide their delight, and many tech priests seemingly patted themselves on their backs and held their toasters close to their chests, as they just so happen to have brought, without telling each other, esoteric weapons and strange devices. And though some could be dubbed heretical, I don't think Cawl would mind that if they're effective, and it might bring an advantage to the Imperial forces in this sector. And just to point out here that Cawl does not know about these weapons. So Zarek sends Theron Neltaric with Technomandrites known as the Eyes of the Void and many rarely used Necron weapons. Neltaric unleashed the full fury of her stable of ancient war engines and gave Eyes of the Void free rein from the off. Doomstalkers picked their way through the worn-torn streets of Tarantis' hives, towering over the advancing Necron soldiers and unleashing the cosmic energies of experimental weaponry upon the hapless Astra Militarum defenders. These guys are going to get crushed. Hundreds of human soldiers were blasted into carbonized statues, reduced to their component atoms, or tattered apart like screaming clouds caught in hurricane winds. The Aquilatus spaceport fell to a spearhead thrust by doomsday arcs, and Seraptech heavy constructs coupled with a dimensional raiding party of Hexmark destroyers who emerged within the port's subterranean bunkers slaughtered every Imperial soldier there. Even the warlord titan Dracos Apocalypsta was laid low after being confronted with a trio of Tesseract arcs as it sought to take the Herald's Bridge over the river's purges. Cawl's raid answered and further weapons unleashed on the Imperial side. Magos Orada unleashed his secret arcana, even as the two loyalist fleets engaged the tomb ships in Tarantian local space. This device, known as the Ark of Oblivion, sounds like something from Doctor Who, was fired like a torpedo from Orada's flagship, the Ex Machinus. With its safety walls cracked and full awakening, protocols crackling through its ominous black outer shell, the Ark streaked into the heart of the Necron fleet before unleashing a devastating contra-molecular shockwave. Three mighty tomb ships shuddered in the grip of the Ark's power, the living metal of the hulls and their luckless passengers vibrating itself to a spreading slurry as excitation fields ripped through them. The attack turned the void battle decisively in the humans' favour. However, thanks to a lack of warning from the secretive Orada, Mechanicus Prime Best saw significant casualties amongst her forces, as a number of their landing craft were also caught in the outermost ripples of the detonation. Outraged at what they saw as the ignorant and clumsy deployment of a weapon that was beyond the humans' true ken, the Eyes of the Void responded by unshackling their most devastating and unpredictable weapon. Through processes known by no one but the Technomandrites and their cabals, they had splintered a shackled shard of Eash Udra and bound its energistic fragments into 1,000-strong swarm of canoptic constructs that they now unleashed, burning with Geist-like energy, shuddering in and out of sync with reality. The ravening swarm overran several beleaguered Astra Militarum regiments before sweeping down upon the drop shites, where Mechanicus Prime Best's landing parties were still attempting to reorder their strength. The constructs brought with them the insidious madness of the endless swarm. Their mechanoid voices chittered and echoed within the minds of their victims, even as those same Doom warriors felt their consciousnesses divided into fractal compounds. Soon They could not tell if they looked through their own eyes or those of the horrors attacking them, and Skitarii turned upon Skitarii in nightmare combat. Rather than endure such a hideous fate, Best resolved to unleash her own secret weapon of the Omnissiah, because what could go wrong at this point? None beyond the Manipulus Prime and her inner circle would ever know the true nature of this device. However, for the moment, its empiric baffles were lowered, its ancient power source reacted in unexpected ways to the powers of Iesh Udra. The result was a silent orb of steadily expanding darkness, dancing with blue-white skeins of energy and churning with myriad suggestions of somehow insectile movement that consumed Best and her maniples in a matter of minutes. The unleashed calamity did not stop there. The orb of darkness continued to grow, swallowing up at first the armies warring around it, then hundreds of miles of Tyrantus' surface. Humans and Necrons alike died fighting as the darkness swept over them, or else fled before the annihilating energies in hope of outrunning them. By the time the orb finally stopped growing and vanished like a popped bubble, it had raised a third of Tyrantus' mass along with countless billions of living organisms. In its wake it left a ravaged planet tumbling out of its orbital trajectory. The evacuated and shell-shocked remnants of once mighty armies, and a plague of nightmares and strange visions that would bedevil the remaining inhabitants of the system long after Zarek's offensive had come to a close. We are then told how this conflict repeats itself in other areas, with other Maguses unleashing their weapons. On Thalsifer, Magos Einwald Viridian unleashed Morgraz Fex Hyper Alembic upon the Orsk legions of Overlord Kutzmek. Necrons and Imperial forces alike were reduced to bubbling slime by the resultant non-viral outbreak, and the entire planet had to be quarantined to prevent its further spread. In the Zan system, a concerted Imperial push upon a Voidborn Necron pylon triggered a massive naval engagement that was in turn thrown into chaos by the efforts of a cabal of Zarek's plasmancers. The bound dwarf star they propelled into the Imperial naval formations wrought catastrophic damage and killed billions in minutes. However, a desperate ramming action by the Chalice-class cruiser Silence and Suffering shattered one of these stellar shackles containing the star's power. Resultant uncontrolled flares raked the Zan pylon, overloading several of its quantum shields and causing substantial damage. Seeing what was happening, Archmagos Call issues orders to stop, but they are slow to spread, and the Silent King ordered more weapons to be deployed. Cryptek hyperscience now came to the forefront of the conflict like never before. Necron forces across the Nephilim subsector activated and deployed the most hazardous and often the most unstable artifacts at their command. Crypteks allied to the Silent King were urged to cripple or annihilate human resistance with speed, regardless of the cost in catastrophic collateral damages to continents, planets, stars, or entire systems. Devices were unleashed that uncoiled gravitic ribbons thousands of miles long like titanic whips that hypercharged planetary crusts into electrifying terminals that fragmented or flattened mountain ranges with magnetophasic beams or loosed howling gales of planar slivers to flay armies down to atoms. At Zeta Hespus, Crypteks of the Nihilak dynasty unleashed a shocking 10 Satan shards upon a single war zone, seeing the gods' echo's destructive potential as outweighing the risk of allowing such insane shadows of malice to congregate. And those are the amazing weapons they deployed. But where does Vashtor come into this? As he approaches the area on the bound together fragments that had once been Caliban, that was now known as Wormwood, there are signs in the system that he's arriving, from malfunctioning technology to the blurting out of binaric emitters. And we also see his influence elsewhere. Mirmi, Dominus Gelf, wrestled with the ancient and impossibly complex systems of Shivarik's constellation. Paranoid whispers within his augmetic cortex warned that the weapon had been sabotaged by his detractors and convinced the dangerously deranged Magos to disable the satellite's safety regulators in hope of forcing them into operation. Deep in the void, 25 weapon satellites from the dark age of technology crackled with sudden overcharge. One by one, their corrupted machine minds achieved choristry, and their microthrusters propelled them into an arcane alignment thousands of miles across that had nothing to do with Gelf's increasingly frantic commands, energy weapons that had been ancient when the Emperor ascended his throne thrummed to life and prepared to fire. The first volley lit the firmament with a coruscating lines of inimical energy that bifurcated one tomb ship, eviscerated another two, and scythed through 4 Imperial warships. Cries of alarm filled the human and alien communication networks alike, as Chivalric's constellation realigned with increasing speed, then fired again. More warships on both sides died, even as their crews attempted to comprehend how their shielding and defense measures had been so contemptuously bypassed. The satellites realigned and fired, each volley leaving behind it incredibly complex energy glyphs that overlapped one another against the blackness of the void. Flaming wrecks tumbled through space, venting escape craft and blazing wreckage. The one-sided battle descended into anarchy as some shipmasters sought to escape the wholesale destruction, whilst others, gripped by zeal and xenophobia, attempted to capitalise upon it. Then came an almighty convulsion of reality. At the heart of the maze of crisscrossing energy glyphs, the fabric of real space bowed in a fish-eye distortion that spread and grew by the moment. All spectres shrieked warning, then overloaded as impossible energy spikes drove their governing machine spirits instantly mad. Cryptex worked frantically at the controls of hyperspatial acolytes, cursing in bewilderment as impossible, contradictory readouts flashed across their instruments. The satellites of Chivalric's constellation detonated one after another in a rippling string of explosions, whose flames swirled through the void towards these swelling distortions like a vortex, even as their feedback painted Myrmidomus Gelf's sanctum with his ejected brain matter. All the released energy of the satellites and their glowing glyphs flowed inwards, building at the centre of the fisheye distortion to a glowing point that became a rupture, then burst outward in a geyser of ejected ectoplasm and tattering unreality. Ghost light blazed like a newborn star at the heart of the Scarran system as something psychoplian and dreadful bored its way through into real space from the liminal zones beyond, and wormwood emerges with Vashtor on it. So in line with their corrupt machine minds, I think the satellites were affected once the Magos had turned off the safety regulators, and then did all that damage on the casual corrupting influence of Vashtor. Or at least that's my take on it. And so now, friends, I turn things over to you. What do you think to the awesome weapons of Doom unleashed here? Do you realise how hard a lot of them were to say? Which side did best in the terms of warfare? And how do you think the arrival of Vashtor will play out here? I would like to see him have some tech battle with Khal, but I feel Khal will be outclassed by this demigod of machines. Comment down below.